Hello and welcome to the Radical Podcast, inspired by the essence of the word radical, proceeding from the root. We explore the roots of metaphysical wisdom.
This season is all about divination, tarot, and the power held within our intuition. This is The Radical with Nicole and Christina, the two metaphysical girls in the material world. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Radical Podcast. My name is Nicole, and today is the start of Season 2, our seasonal walk through the tarot.
Hello, everyone, and I'm Christina. I am the other co-host of this podcast, and I am so excited. I didn't have any nervousness in myself until Nicole hit record, and then I realized this is our first episode of Season 2.
This episode is all about divination. What is divination? What even is tarot? Christina's going to tell us all about that in the first segment. And in the second segment, I'm going to talk about oracle cards and how they are different from tarot cards. And I have a little bit on the unseen and the yin principle and how that ties into divination. And then our messages from the universe today are coming from a new deck that I got for myself specifically for this season. It's going to be perfect for our journey through this season. And this deck is called the Visionary I Ching, and this is by Paul O'Brien.
That is a very new deck, and I've never even heard of what that deck is based on. So I am really looking forward to learning more about that deck as we move through the season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great addition. So to start us off, what is divination? And a simple practical definition is that divination is the practice of seeking insight or guidance from a higher source or the unseen using symbols, tools, or intuitive methods. And we're not necessarily giving agency over to the cards, but rather tarot and oracle, for an example, are used as tools to connect with our own intuition and receive guidance from higher or inner sources. Maybe this is our inner wisdom, but I do like that it's an unseen source. I'll kind of carry that thread throughout.
I have said this before in one of our other podcasts, and it was really illuminating to me the first time I heard it, or the first time I read it, when an author was talking about the interpretation of a card, and there were several characters on the card, and they said sometimes you're the character in the front of the card, and sometimes you're the character in the back of the card. It depends on where you are in your life, your journey, your well-being. When you look at the card, who you relate to on the card and what you relate to on the card. And that's why it's our intuition looking at the card, because the colors, the pictures, the representations can all mean different things to us at different times. And even what we relate to on the card, like the first thing you see on a card, can be different every time you see it.
Some examples of divination besides tarot and oracle cards can include candle gazing, reading tea leaves, using pendulums, runes, astrology, or analyzing your dreams.
Just to name a few. I think as humans, we have been looking at everything, looking at nature, looking at everything around us for signs and symbols of what's to come. Right? Everything that we have, feathers on the ground, butterflies flying past us, everything has a meaning. or can. Everything can have a meaning based on the person who's looking at it. I'm going to start talking about the history of tarot. I'm going to highlight just the big points in the history of tarot. There's so much information on this out there, listeners. I primarily use the Wikipedia page and some of the books that I have at home, but I'm just highlighting the big pieces of tarot history. So essentially, what Nicole and I are talking about for a tarot deck is a a tarot deck with 78 cards that are divided into two arcanas, 22 major arcana and 56 minor arcana. The major arcana generally is depicted as the hero or the fool's journey, which is the human journey of internal growth, self actualization, life experiences, transcendence, death, return to source. But generally, it's a journey. The minor cards, the 56 minor arcana, are 14 in each suit, divided up of each of the suits, which can be identified as elements, which can be identified as other objects. But that's what we mean when we say tarot deck. There's a lot of different styles of tarot decks out there, but you'll hear us highlighting those major points as we're talking about it. So the history of that style of tarot deck, its history, its great, 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 great grand forebears are playing cards. And the playing cards were most likely invented in China during the Tang Dynasty because the Chinese had a really good grasp on paper and they used wood blocks to print things. That was a good article. If you have the time, go read about the history of paper. But the card games could have started as gambling or leisure, but they might have been originally using actual pieces of paper money to play the game, but that got very expensive, and it wasn't really common for the people who were having these leisure activities to have the money bills laying around. So they made the cards to represent the money. That's one theory on how this got started, that these paper cards came to be. Then by the 11th century, playing cards were spreading throughout the Asian continent and then came into Egypt. And the cards that first came into Europe probably came through Egypt just because of the way that those cards were styled with the court cards and with four suits. So that's how they traced it back to that style of card coming up through Egypt. There were probably other different styles of cards, but this is the one that we're talking about. And probably first arrived in Spain. They have the very earliest mention that they can find in written records in Spain in 1371. So we've got these decks of cards starting to become popular and move and become easily for everybody to get. They started to become widely circulated. The art of cartomancy, like the card reading, is fortune telling or divination using a deck of cards. That was coming up right along with the decks and then just became more popular as the decks became more widely circulated. The first written references to tarot packs occur 1440 and 1450 in northern Italy. And then it's becoming more stylized and more structured in the major arcana and the minor arcana. But then we really take the leap into the tarot cards that we have today. And the first assignments, or the first people to begin to assign divinatory meanings to the tarot cards, one of the first was Jean-Baptiste Alliette. Is that how you would pronounce that?
Mm-hmm.
Alliette. Also known as Attilia, was in 1783. Very famous name in the history of tarot. Not hard to find more information on this person. Then and that was mostly in France. For our history in the English-speaking countries, it was through the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in 1988. No, it was 18. 1888, that the occult tarot became established for the English speaking world. And the Hermetic Order of the Dawn, fascinating reading, fascinating characters in that history. If you've got some time, go look it up. Lots of information on them. Essentially, they took the playing cards from the France and Italy, and then what they did, here's some of the highlights of what they did. They renamed some of the suits from batons to wands and coins to pentacles. They began to assign the divinatory meanings to the cards. They did change the order. Have you seen how the strength and the justice card are swapped in some decks and not swapped in other decks? Well, I know why now. Essentially, the Golden Dawn switched them because they wanted to line up the major arcana with the tree of life and the Kabbalistic letters with the planetary associations. And it matched better to switch those two. Okay. Then they also swapped the order of the king and the knight, and they gave one of the court they called the page the princess. There was the king, the queen, the knight, and the princess, and then what we would know as the page today. All right. And then also the Order of the Dawn assigned the court cards letters from the tetragrammaton, associating the court cards and suits with the four classic elements. The Order of the Dawn did that, and then began to give the pentacles earth, the wands fire, the swords air, and the cups water. They had other associations before then, but the Order of the Dawn really are the that's the tradition we use today. I'm sure there's others, but that's the one that Nicole and I are using today. All right. And they also associated each of the 36 cards. They rank them from 2 to 10 with the 36 astrological decans. That's when that happened. I know, Nicole, you've been kind of researching a lot on the decans, so that's when that happened. And then the Fool and the other 21 Triumph cards, the major arcana, using the Kabbalistic correspondences with the Hebrew alphabet. I just mentioned that. And that also assigning that with the Tree of Life. Switched the 8 and the 10, and then gave, along with the elements, the planetary associations. So that is a lot of what I find the most interesting in tarot. And now I know exactly when that happened and the history of that. And I can go and read more specifically on why and how they did that. So look that up if you want to dig deeper into that topic. It's out there. This was just basically the outline. So for the English speaking countries, our tradition of decks, generally the tarot cards are used almost exclusively for divination. We as English speaking culture don't play card games with the tarot, but they do in France and Italy. They use a tarot deck and they have a card game that goes with it. A deck that is almost always seen when you're talking about tarot is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. That was released in 1909. That was the first cartomatic tarot deck, which means it was full color pictures. That is one solid tradition in our culture. And then the Thoth deck, and this one is a little different because the lineage of that deck, the 8 and the 10 are back the other way. So if you see, so you can kind of tell which deck you're looking at and which tradition they follow based on where the 8 and the 10 are. But the Thoth deck was released in 1944. Some of the early forerunners of tarot in the US, one of the first books that was very popular, 1920, by Paul Foster Case, used the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and it's called An Introduction to the Study of Tarot. And that was very popular. Another forerunner, Eden Gray, very active in the 1960s, and particularly they said 1969. Tarot really took off with popularity in the United States. I think more books were becoming available. And we have the 1980s and 1990s, new generation of tarotists influenced by Eden Gray, but also Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell, who were using these as psychological, or is that right? Psychological archetypes, along with the hero's journey. Tarot today, there's no limit to the styles of decks, the reimagining of the suits, the court cards, major arcana, and the decks representing modern life, modern concerns, modern images. I can see why if you walked into a metaphysical shop and there was a wall of card decks, that it would be overwhelming to know exactly what you were looking at and whether it was an oracle deck or a tarot deck. I hope that's helpful to get to answer some questions and to help you listeners, if you're still curious about this, find out more specifically. A couple word definitions, and I just Nicole and I were just doing some work this weekend, and I just learned that arcana means secrets. I didn't know that until like a couple days ago. Like, how did that one get by me for so long? Arcana is a plural noun meaning secrets or mysteries. It's from the Latin arcanus. The singular of that word is arcanum. So I thought we need to take that word and make the radical arcana. And that's going to be a place where we put all of our secrets and mysteries and all like the things that we discovered and found out. That'll be like a book that we release, listeners. That'll be the name of it.
I like it. The Radical Arcana coming
I was,
soon.
yes. I was like, I want to use that word for more than that because that word is, I really enjoy it. Tarot, the word itself, is derived from the Italian word tarocchi. So tarocchi, through the French language to English, that's why the T is silent in tarot, like Merlot, because it's a French word that we are now saying in English. And I knew it was Italian, but I didn't really draw the connection that that it came through the French language to us. But I always knew this the T was silent, but I never really kind of like read about that in my mind. Like, why is that a French word that we're saying in English? Because the French, it was very, very, very popular in France, and that is where the divination really started with tarot in France. Tarocchi is a plural from the form tarocco, which is a card deck for playing trick-taking games, which means, if you're unfamiliar with like card games, it means that the games have a trump or triomphe or triumph suit, which means that when you play that card, you win that hand or that trick. So this is spades, hearts, bridge, pinochle, those styles of card games. And I have played so many games of spades. That was the game when I was a young soldier, when I first joined the army. We played spades everywhere all the time because all you needed was a deck of cards. A deck of cards and like a place to put the cards down. I played a lot of spades, and this was before iPhones and video games. So this is how we socialized. This is what we did when we were sitting around, when we were at barbecues, when we were at unit functions, when we were at parties, when we were just hanging out in the barracks. Spades. Also Yahtzee. Have you ever played Yahtzee? The dice game? That was another favorite one of my young army days.
I played a lot of Yahtzee during the pandemic when we were at home. I played a lot of Yahtzee then.
But I have very fond memories. So my family, my father's family, they played pinochle, which I guess is not bridge, because a pinochle deck, you have double. You don't have any of the lower numbers, like the lower pip cards. It's only nines and up. and you need two sets of nines, tens, and everything in the same deck. So either you had a pinochle deck or you had to make a pinochle deck out of two other decks of cards. But my dad's family were pinochle players, and I have many really nice memories of sitting and watching them play pinochle. Anyway, that's the history of our tarot cards are coming from those type of card games. And human history with card games and gambling is incredibly fascinating. We could do just like a whole season on the history of that if we wanted to. But I thought it was a really fun walk through the history of tarot because all of that is in the lineage of why we have these tarot decks today.
So I don't know if I certainly am not the only person to have thought this, but I had this belief that tarot decks were evil. So when I was putting together my notes, I was thinking about that and how I think that belief is probably still out there. That tarot is bad because there's negative cards.
I think I told you this that in our popular culture from hundreds or 100 years ago, the tarot cards were a tool of telling a story. Like in one of the most popular operas, Carmen, she's playing with cards and she has the death card and she sings a song about it. And that is from the operatic time when when humans were like going to the opera for entertainment. So that the the stigma of the tarot cards I think has been around for a very long time and have been used to tell stories about bad things happening to people for a long time.
And I think because we're using intuition and unseen forces, that there's a narrative that tarot cards and divination is negative, bad, evil, because that props up the patriarchy.
Mm.
Yin energy is associated with the unseen, and yang energy with the seen and the known. And in our culture, what is unseen and unknown causes fear. And I would go so far as to say the fear in our culture morphs into disdain, especially since our culture prizes yang characteristics. And we will continue throughout the season to talk about yin and yang, I am sure.
Mm-hmm.
When we say yin, that's for the feminine principle and characteristics like receptive, nourishing, fertile, and still. And yang is for the masculine principle that describes energetic characteristics that are projective, activating, consuming, and moving. And in our Sedna podcast last season, I talked about a book I read, and the author, Jennifer Gell, says that the yang has been sort of prized at the expense and the historical denigration of the feminine principle. And I think that shows up in our society today as toxic masculinity and the patriarchy, but also generations of people who have come to doubt themselves, doubt their own intuition and inner knowing, and become overly reliant on the yang principle. I think as a society and a culture, we tend to use our minds over our hearts, and we look at what is externally and outwardly known or observable, or what is already socially accepted versus listening to our inner voice.
Mm-hmm.
According to the scientific community, we only sense 5% of all reality.
Hmm. Isn't that crazy?
And that's the yang.
Percent. Yeah. 5% what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we feel. 5.
There is so much disease surrounding an over reliance on the yang concepts of self sufficiency, pushing, exerting, and forcing outcomes. Deepak Chopra taught us, or he said, you can still get results through effort and through trying, but at a cost. The cost is stress, heart attacks, and the compromised function of your immune system. Instead, it is my opinion that we have to, that we must incorporate the stillness and the silence that's part of the yin principle and trust the unseen rather than fear it like we've been conditioned to. And sometimes trusting the unseen means not doing anything, waiting, and not knowing. I have a quote here from the guidebook of my new deck, the I Ching book. And Paul O'Brien says the wisdom of informed timing is that sometimes this means just watching and waiting for the best time to act. And I feel like a divination practice, by its very nature, is very, very yin. And it encompasses and includes all these different options that are not maybe present or included in our modern day thinking. Our modern day thinking says we must be doing something all the time. Or if we don't know the answer, we have to do more research. We have to think about it more. And to me, in my experience with divination practices, when I use my cards, sometimes the guidance that comes through is stop, wait, stay in the space of not knowing, let things unfold a little bit more. Don't do
Mm-hmm.
anything yet. So, the wisdom of informed timing, watching and waiting. And I have a little note here too. Any divination practice can feel very ceremonial or ritual like. You could have an altar, a sacred space, candles, incense, but you don't need any of those things. And even without those things, even if it's you sitting on your bedroom floor with cards just spread out on the ground, sort of the point is that time of quiet stillness, soaking in the yin principle, getting in touch with your intuition and kind of getting out of the mental chatter. To me, divination practices allow us to reclaim our intuition and our inner knowing, our yin essence. And it's also a way for us to connect with each other and our shared wisdom. So this idea, Christina mentioned Carl Jung. This idea comes from him and his study of archetypes. But the collective unconsciousness can be thought of as a universal psychic layer shared by all humans. So, when we're doing divination practices, I believe that collective source of wisdom, where the archetypes live, the collective unconscious, that universal psychic layer, I think we're tapping into that. And I believe that we strengthen that network by participating in it and with it.
That's a really good way of putting that. And participating with it. I like that.
So, what is Oracle? It is not a set of 78 standardized cards.
I wrote a note and I was like, Nicole, I don't even know how I'm going to say this because there's so many different styles of like, okay, so I'm talking about tarot decks and then she's going to talk about a little bit about oracle decks. But every sort of definition that I was going to say, okay, so you have a tarot deck when A, the cards are numbered, and I'm like, nope, that's not true because I have a tarot deck where it's not numbered. Okay. Oh, there's a minor arcana there's a major arcana and a minor arcana. Nope, that's not true because I have another tarot deck where it's just a series of numbers divided into elements. And then I'm like, okay, so is it that they're divided into elements? Maybe not. The tarot deck essentially would be the author will have the set number of cards, and hopefully they will give you the means to see how their interpretation of the card corresponds with the classic interpretation of the card. So they might be calling card 7 in Earth, but that is the 7 of Pentacles in the classic tarot. They might have a different name for the beginning of the Fool's Journey. They might have a different name for the steps in it, but they have 22 cards that represent that journey. That's a tarot deck. That the structure, there's that type of structure. Tarot journey, elements, and suits, that it's divided up like that. Generally, there is more structure to it than the oracle deck style.
And I have, in quotation marks, standardized. So not a set of 78 standardized cards, because not all tarot decks, like Christina just said, are standardized.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, oracle cards, they have no set number of cards. And generally, they are not organized the way a tarot deck is organized into arcanas and suits, generally speaking. Most of my oracle decks happen to be themed on goddesses, but also archetypes, animal spirits, archangels, but there's so many more. There's astrology oracle decks, phases of the moon, chakras,
Crystals, flowers, herbs. I've seen them all.
the wheel of the year.
Yep. Oh, Nicole gave me one. The Solitary Witch, and I think it's very seasonal. It has the major Sabbaths and the seasonal events in there. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, with oracles, it is wide ranging. Oracle cards were my gateway into tarot, because oracle cards, you'll sometimes hear there are no bad cards. In tarot, we have the devil card, the death card, the tower card, and those get labeled as the bad cards. So that's how I heard it. That's how it was passed to me. Oh, don't buy a tarot deck. There are negative cards in there. You want to get an oracle deck. There are no bad cards. Of course, I have come to understand the tarot deck differently, and that those cards, it's very unfair and simplistic to say those are negative cards. We will cover them in way more detail in a future episode, but that's how that information was given to me at first. So that's where I started. And some people will say that oracle decks are easier to learn. I think that's an interesting way to say it. But I think what they're driving at when people say that is you're really relying more so on your intuition and what the author of the deck writes in the guidebook. With tarot, generally, we're looking at more symbolism, the archetypes, the hero's journey, the
numerology tarot.
Sort of the traditional structure of the deck, the majors, the minors, the elements, ancient wisdom, and correspondences to numerology, like Christina said, and astrology. So there's a lot more packed into tarot, But that's not to say that in oracle decks you wouldn't consider numerology or symbolism as you see it reflected in the cards. But a lot of people think tarot can be really overwhelming because there's so much to it. In my opinion, oracle cards were a great place for me to start because it helped me develop a relationship with my intuition. And I say it that way on purpose because I don't think it's a light switch. You know, people are like, I want to awaken my intuition. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a more of a relationship that you form and you build and you maintain, as well as your relationship with the care of the unseen spiritual forces around us. And these are a couple ways that I use and incorporate my oracle deck. Sometimes I use just oracles, and sometimes I will do tarot and oracle together. So sometimes it's fun to use an oracle card as a significator card, which you are welcome to do that with a tarot card as well. But a significator card lends its energy to a reading or creates a theme, such as love or healing. You would typically find the card that you want as your significator and place it somewhere as you're doing your card spread. A clarifying card or multiple clarifying cards. I like to use oracle cards to accompany a tarot card spread, and the oracle may help give me additional insight, give more clarity, give me more perspective or specificity. So if I'm not really sure what the tarot is trying to say, I may pull a card from an oracle deck to get more information. And sometimes with a tarot spread, I might get really good information on how to read a situation, like kind of what's going on. But Oracle can sometimes help me figure out what I'm supposed to do about it. So, the actions to take, how to work with the energy, benefits of divination. If I'm feeling stuck or confused, or I'm just going to pull some cards, I tend to feel more supported and connected by source. And I often walk away from reading cards feeling like there's a purpose to what's going on, or there's at least wisdom to be gained. So, this idea of what is happening for my highest benefit or what is available for me to learn. It shifts my perspective. And I said I come into a quote unquote higher perspective. And I sort of mean like a less emotional perspective, a wider perspective, maybe like a bird's eye view perspective. I feel more confident and I have more clarity around what's going on. So for this season, our seasonal walk through the tarot, this is sort of the preview, the map of where we're going. During each zodiac season, we are dedicating in episode 2. First, the major arcana card that corresponds with the zodiac sign of the season we're in. Second, the corresponding 3 minor arcana cards. And third, the tarot card, which corresponds to the celestial body or planet domiciled during the zodiac sign of the season we're in. And we'll
Mm-hmm.
have a few deeper dive topics sprinkled in. And we fully acknowledge that this is quote unquote out of order. A lot of tarot courses and tarot teachers start at the beginning and they go through 0 through 21 of the major arcana. And then they move on and they do the different elements, the different suits.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not doing it that way. We are looking to present the tarot cards as they align with the seasons. And we chose to do it this way because we're coming out of our season of astrology. So this is a way to continue to incorporate astrology and the season.
Well, that's what we did with the zodiac. The beginning of season 1, we started with what?
Virgo.
Libra, Virgo. That's how I see it, is that our intention is to flow with the natural rhythms of nature and the natural flow of time. So to me, it makes total sense to stay with the Leo energy and talk about the Leo cards. But I can totally understand if you're like starting listening with us, listeners, in season, you're like, oh, strength card, that's number 8. What about the other ones? This is why.
I'm excited to approach it in this way.
Mm-hmm. I like it. It feels right to me. It felt really, really good to me to do the zodiac year this way, to talk about what was coming up, what how we were feeling, what the weather was like, what our energy was like, what our priorities were, just the highs and lows of our personal energies as we were moving through the zodiac year. So in my mind, we're moving through this hero's journey. They call it the fool's journey a lot when referencing the tarot deck. Have you seen that? Because the
Mm-hmm.
fool is the card 0. And essentially, it means the same thing. It's the journey of the human spirit, the human self through the world. But we're kind of like following it in the same way you would follow in the season, which is actually how it was meant to be. We were meant to move through this journey with the flow of time and the flow of weather and the flow of energy around us. So tell us what you think, listeners. Send us an email. Tell us what you think about it. But give us a couple episodes to get warmed up. I think it's going to be awesome. I feel like it's going to be awesome. I'm already excited.
Yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm on our end. We have big plans. And so we're
Mhm.
starting our walk next week with the strength card. As Christina said, the 8th card in the major arcana because of its correspondence to Leo. And we're in Leo season.
And the Rider White Smith tradition and the Toth
Yes.
tradition, it would be. See, I know that now. I know that now because I just researched it. I mean, I knew the cards were switched on some decks, but not all decks, but I didn't actually know why, and now I know why. I'm so grateful to know why.
So I have 2 messages from the universe today. So you're going to choose card A or B. And the deck, again, is the Visionary I Ching by Paul O'Brien. And the art is by Joan Larimore. And I do just want to give like a teeny bit of background on this deck. So the I Ching translates to Book of Changes, and it's by Taoist sages. It's one of the oldest books in the world. In the guidebook, Paul O'Brien tells us that the I Ching is a psychologically sophisticated divination system that stimulates intuition. He says you might call it a tool for visionary decision making. There's a big emphasis on decision making. And the box that the deck came in, on the back it says success and happiness arise from the quality of the decisions you make and how well you manage changes in your life, which sounds a lot like luck equals preparation plus opportunity.
That's it.
So we'll do card A or B. And there's so much more to these cards and throughout the season. hopefully I can cover even more and go even deeper, sort of bit by bit. There are hexagrams and the elements. I'm excited. So, card A is card 34, Great Vigor. The elements, thunder above, sky below. Congratulations. There is strength and vigor in this situation, like that of a ram that knocks down a fence to free himself from captivity. This points to a time when a strong force comes into its own and asserts its power. When a leader comes into a position of power, their personal strength has usually already peaked. Though great stamina was required in climbing to the top of the mountain, once at the summit, the support of others is needed to maintain position. Therefore, a shift in attitude becomes necessary to persevere in what is right and just. Let your strength be tempered by wisdom. To maintain power, the strong leader learns to share it with others, for only then will their position be secure. A strong leader will not only be the possessor of power, but a source of it. If you find yourself in an influential position, it is important to act responsibly and react with care. Power must not be allowed to degenerate into raw force that rides roughshod over everything in its path. A strong sense of responsibility for the collective good is the key to the successful exercise of power. By following what we intuitively know to be for the greater good, we avoid reckless abuses, which in the end only undermine the source of our strength. Arrogance contains the seeds of its own undoing. And the second card is card 50, the cauldron. Fire above, wind below. The cauldron symbolizes nourishment and rejuvenation. Sooner or later, good comes to those who do good. Joy comes to those who bring joy to others. Opportunity comes to those who persist in their dreams. Rejuvenation is a returning to one's natural desires and the recharging of batteries that comes from making progress towards one's aspirations. This reading suggests nourishment and transformation for people of goodwill. Good fortune and success are indicated here. Healthy, regular sustenance is vitally important, as symbolized by the cooking pot, which provides nourishment to all. When the cycle of humanity reaches its apex, each person's sustenance comes in the form of fulfilling their deepest needs and desires. Rejuvenation means that people in honorable pursuit of their dreams are properly nourished and valued. When society is functioning properly, such people are supported and encouraged to contribute to their best abilities. A fresh approach to old habits is indicated. Look for ways of putting new life into old forms. Only when great vitality is present can real breakthrough be achieved. Thank you, universe.
Thank you, universe. Those are some new imagery and some new ways of thinking about the elements for me. What a fascinating deck.
I love it. I love it already. And I think it will, like I said, be a good accompaniment this season. And just it fits with everything we're talking about. So I think it's going to be beautiful and perfect.
I think that there's no right or wrong number of tarot decks to own or oracle decks to own. There's a lot of information about the right, in quotation marks, the right and the wrong way to handle your tarot decks and your oracle decks. I mean, you and I might touch on that, like our own personal practices, but I don't believe there's any rules based or anything that needs to be done or not done with your tarot deck or your oracle deck, and how you use it and how you store it and when you use it. The whole point of these decks is for us to connect with our intuition and our yin side. We read the information, we're presented with information, and then we decide what is the correct number of decks, what is the correct time of day, what is the correct way to do this. Like Nicole said, there could be a ritual, you could have, set circumstances, but you could also just carry them around in your purse. And whenever you're thinking about something, take them out and look at them. And once I gave myself permission truly to let go of the things I thought needed to go with these decks, I really, really started using them in a way that made sense to me. I let go of the stories and the stigma and the things that I heard and the rules that I've heard, and I just really allowed myself to like just do whatever. And that's when I really, really started using them and traveling with them, and letting that be a relationship I had with the practice, with tapping into that collective unconscious, through my intuition. That's the one final note I'd like to say on tarot and oracle cards, is to do it your way.
I was listening to a Bob Ross, painting episode.
Yeah.
And he said something along the lines of, when you bought your first tube of paint, it came with an artist's license. So you do what you think is right. No one can tell you you're wrong. So I love that. And when you buy your first oracle deck or tarot deck, you also get a divination license, and no one can tell you what's right or wrong.
Yep. So let's travel together, listeners, through the tarot deck, through the seasons of the year, and let us have a lot of fun in season 2.
We love you. Thank you for listening today. We'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. The Radical Podcast is created and produced by Nicole and Christina.
Music by Van Horton. His Instagram is Van Horton Music. Stay in touch with us at linktr.ee/theradicalpodnc.